No woman could control the vampire king Playboy. A simple waitress did the unthinkable. The city of Nytheria never slept, but it never fully woke either. Shadows clung to the narrow streets like living things, curling around lampposts and cobblestones. The night held a heavy perfume of incense, smoke, and whispered secrets. High above in the blackened towers of the vampire palace, the infamous King Cale Draven watched over his city, his eyes like molten silver scanning the night for the faintest ripple of disturbance. Cale was known as the Untouchable, the Playboy King, the predator of all desires. No woman had ever bent to him willingly, and few dared approach him. He carried an aura of danger and seduction alike, a combination that made him feared and worshipped in equal measure. Yet beneath the mask of arrogance, Cale was a prisoner of his own curse. Any bond he formed ended in betrayal and loss. The weight of centuries had taught him that even love could become a weapon. And yet tonight, fate had a strange plan. Alara Wren, a simple mortal, walked through the winding alleys carrying a tray of pastries and tea. Her steps were light, her eyes bright with curiosity, and her heart unaware of the darkness that dwelled in the highest tower of the palace above her. She had always been fascinated by the city's mysteries, by the whispers of supernatural happenings, but she lived humbly, content with her small shop near the bustling night market. Life was hard, but she had a resilience and warmth that made people smile. Tonight, she had been asked to deliver refreshments to a private gathering. A wealthy client, she thought, unaware that the house she approached belonged to the vampire king himself. The massive doors of blackened iron swung open as if guided by an invisible hand, and Alara found herself stepping into a world of marble and shadow. The hall was filled with masked figures, their faces hidden, their movements fluid and deliberate. Candles flickered, casting pale light across sharp features and gleaming eyes. At the center, a man sat upon a throne carved from black stone. His presence was immediate and commanding. Cale Draven. The moment Alara's gaze met his, she felt something stir, a chill that ran deeper than the night's air. Most mortals would have dropped their heads in fear, stumbled, or turned to flee. But not Alara. She paused for a heartbeat, then smiled politely. "Here's your order," she said, placing the tray on a side table. Her voice was clear, calm, unafraid. Cale's eyes narrowed, silver flames flickering in his gaze. "You speak without fear," he murmured, leaning forward. "Most tremble before me." Alara tilted her head, curious. "Why should I fear you?" "You're just a man." A mortal had just dared call the vampire king just a man. Whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire, but Cale sat in stunned silence. No one had ever spoken to him this way. Not with politeness, not with boldness, and certainly not with the kind of calm that suggested she didn't see him as a monster. "You are different," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous, like distant thunder. "Most would fall at my feet or vanish into panic. You smile." Alara shrugged gently. "I can't pretend to be something I'm not. Fear doesn't help anyone." Cale's lips curved slightly, a hint of amusement and intrigue. His centuries of control, manipulation, and charm had failed here. He had never been so caught off guard. For the first time in his long existence, someone had looked through him without flinching. The night stretched on. Alara moved among the masked guests, delivering refreshments while Cale observed her from his throne, entranced by her simple grace. He found himself wondering what it was about her, the way she moved, the laughter that escaped her lips, the quiet strength in her eyes. And with each passing moment, the weight of his curse pressed against him, reminding him that even this fascination could lead to destruction. After the gathering ended, Alara turned to leave, but Cale stepped from his throne, his movements silent and fluid like a shadow. She froze as he approached, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "You should not walk alone at night," he said softly, his voice both a warning and an invitation. "This city holds many dangers that few survive." "I've survived this long," she replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I know how to take care of myself." Cale's silver eyes softened, just for a moment, betraying a vulnerability that few had ever seen. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps fate has brought you here for another reason." Elara blinked. "Fate? You mean me delivering tea?" Kale's lips twitched with amusement, but there was something darker behind his expression, perhaps more than that. And in that moment, an unspoken connection sparked, a fragile thread weaving between their souls. Kale, the immortal king feared by all, found himself drawn to a mortal whose simplicity and courage pierced the armor he had worn for centuries. And Elara, the mortal who had always thought of the supernatural as myth, felt the weight of a gaze that could see through to her very heart. The palace corridors echoed with silence as Kale escorted her to the outer gates. The night outside was crisp and heavy with mist, the moon casting silver streaks across the cobblestones. For a moment they simply walked, words unnecessary, the tension between them growing heavier than the air. Then Kale stopped, turning to face her fully. "I must warn you," he said, his voice deep and serious. "No one can hold me. No mortal, no immortal. My life is not one of companionship, but of power and shadows. You would do well to remember that." Elara met his gaze evenly. "And if I don't?" she asked softly. Kale's expression darkened, the air round him crackling with unspoken danger. "Then you may find yourself lost in ways you cannot imagine." Instead, she smiled faintly. "I'll take that risk." The words lingered in the night, fragile yet fearless. Kale felt a pull he could not name, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and the stirring of something far older than desire. He had never met anyone like her, and yet in that fleeting moment he felt the first spark of a connection he had long believed impossible. As Elara finally stepped into the misty streets, Kale watched her disappear into the shadows. For the first time in centuries, he did not look away. He did not turn back to the throne room, to the comfort of his power. Instead, he felt something unfamiliar: anticipation, longing, and a dangerous hope. He knew the world would not accept this. His court would see it as weakness. Other vampires would see a mortal daring to defy him as a threat. And yet, the thought of her, simple, brave, unafraid, haunted him. He felt a stirring inside him that no power, no charm, no curse could suppress. And somewhere deep within, Kale knew the night was only beginning. For Elara, the world seemed no different than it had before, yet a tremor ran through her heart. She could not explain why she felt the lingering weight of those silver eyes, why the memory of his gaze haunted her every step. There was danger here, yes, but there was also something else. Something she could not name, something that whispered of destiny and change. As she reached the quiet streets near her small shop, the mist curled around her like a protective veil. And yet, she could not shake the feeling that her life had been touched forever by the man who called himself untouchable. That night, the city of Nytheria slept fitfully, shadows shifting in anticipation. And somewhere, in the silent halls of his palace, Kale Draven whispered to the darkness, "No one can hold me, yet she has come." The night had grown heavier over Nytheria, and yet Elara Wren could not sleep. The memory of Kale Draven's silver eyes lingered like a flame she could neither forget nor ignore. Every shadow in her small shop seemed alive, whispering secrets she didn't understand. She tried to tell herself it was foolish, that the Vampire King was a creature of legend and danger. And yet, a strange longing had taken root in her heart, a mix of fear and fascination she could not deny. Meanwhile, in the towering palace, Kale Draven prowled the halls like a predator, restless. The sight of Elara smiling calmly, delivering tea as if she were unaware of the power and danger around her, haunted him. He could not understand why her presence unsettled him so deeply. He had spent centuries surrounded by women who adored, feared, or desired him. And yet, none had stirred him like she had. Kale's curse, the shadow that had haunted his every attempt at connection, whispered to him now. Do not allow her close. Do not trust. She will be lost. But the pull he felt was stronger than caution, stronger than fear. The next evening, Kale summoned her to the palace under a pretense of gratitude for her delivery. When Elara arrived, she was careful, her heart pounding. The palace corridor seemed endless, candlelight flickering across marble walls that gleamed like ice. When she reached the throne room, Kale was waiting, not in his regal posture, but standing quietly near the window, moonlight spilling across his silver hair. "You came," he said, his voice softer than she expected. There was no menace now, only curiosity. "I did," she replied, holding her tray a little tighter. "You asked. I didn't know why, but—" Her words trailed, uncertainty tinged with courage. Kale's eyes studied her, searching for some hidden flaw, some weakness to exploit, but there was none. Only honesty, simplicity, and an unexpected resilience. "Few have courage, Elara," he said. "Most would run before even stepping inside." "I don't know why," she said, "but I don't feel afraid of you." "Not really." The words struck him like lightning. Kale had grown used to fear and desire masking truth. Here, he found neither, only clarity. The world had trained him to trust no one, to see everyone as a threat or tool, yet this mortal stood before him unafraid and uncalculating. "I will show you my city," he said abruptly, "but you must promise to stay within my sight." Elara hesitated, but the allure of the unknown was stronger than caution. "I promise," she said. And so Kale led her through the city under the cloak of night. The streets seemed different now, alive in ways she had never noticed. Shadows twisted around corners, but none threatened them. Moonlight painted the rooftops silver, and the air was scented with jasmine and the faint tang of blood, a reminder that danger still lingered. They walked in silence at first, Kale's presence a constant shadow beside her. Then he spoke. "Do you know why I am feared?" Elara shook her head. "Because people are afraid of what they don't understand." Kyle allowed a faint smile. "Partly. But also because I have power, more than most can imagine. I can command life and death, shadow and storm. And yet power does not protect me from loneliness." Elara glanced at him, curious. "Loneliness?" He looked away, toward the city below. "Every bond I have ever formed has ended in ruin. Every woman who cared for me, lost. Every trust I placed, shattered. That is my curse. That is why no one can control me. That is why I remain untouchable."
Elara said nothing for a long moment.
Then, softly, she asked, "And yet you let me walk beside you." Kale's eyes flickered to hers, silver flames hidden beneath the dark lashes. "Perhaps because you do not try to control me. Perhaps because you are not afraid to see me as I am." The words were like a key turning in a lock within Elara's heart. She realized that the man beside her, feared and adored by all, was not just powerful and cold. He was human, in ways no one had ever dared to see. Their journey led them to the outskirts of the city, where ruins of old temples and forgotten statues stood like echoes of ancient times. The air here was colder, more still. Kale moved with silent grace, a shadow among shadows, and Elara followed, feeling both awe and unease. Then from the darkness came a sudden rustle, a warning that Nytheria's night was never empty. A figure leapt from the shadows, a rival vampire with jagged features and malicious intent. "Elara Wren," the intruder hissed, "you dare to step into our world?" Kale's eyes blazed, and in an instant the night around him seemed to bend. Shadows swirled at his command, and his presence became both terrifying and magnificent. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice low and full of danger. Elara froze, heart racing. The intruder lunged, but Kale was faster, moving like liquid darkness, his strength and speed impossible to match. In a matter of heartbeats, the vampire was cast aside, retreating with a snarl that promised vengeance. Elara's hands trembled as she turned to Kale. Was that real?" she whispered. Kale's expression softened, but the weight of danger did not leave his eyes. "The world is full of threats you cannot imagine," he said. "I protect you because I must, and because I cannot bear the thought of harm coming to you." The admission struck her unexpectedly. Protection from Kale Draven was not just power, it was care. She felt a surge of warmth mixed with fear. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why do you care?" "Because you do not fear me. Because you are different. And because for the first time in centuries, I feel something I thought impossible." Ilara's heart thudded. Something in his voice and his presence made the night feel alive, dangerous and sacred all at once. She wanted to step closer, to touch the truth she sensed but could not name. And yet fear whispered that drawing too near could destroy her. They returned to the palace in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between them. Kale led her to the gardens where moonlight spilled across statues of long-dead kings and queens, their faces frozen in time. He stopped near a fountain, its waters shimmering like liquid silver. "You must leave soon," he said, his voice almost tender. "The world I inhabit is not meant for mortals. You walk a dangerous path simply by being here." Ilara met his gaze, unwavering. "I do not know what is coming, but I
want to see it. I want to understand you."
Kael's heart, or what he allowed to feel as such, stirred violently. He had never encountered a mortal who dared this much. Every instinct screamed to pull away, to shield her from himself, and yet the pull of desire, curiosity, and something deeper rooted him in place. "You should not want this," he murmured. "I am not a man to love, but a storm to survive. You will be hurt, I promise you." "And yet," she whispered, "I am not afraid." He wanted to touch her, to feel her warmth, to know she was real. But he restrained himself. He could not afford weakness. For hours they stood there in silence, two figures caught between worlds, between fear and longing. The night deepened and the city slept beneath them, oblivious to the quiet, dangerous bond forming above. And then, a voice from the shadows broke the fragile peace. "King Draven!" Kale's eyes flared with recognition and warning. Another court vampire had come, eyes cold with jealousy and suspicion. "This mortal is mine to guide," Kale said sharply. "Do not touch her." The vampire bowed, wary, but the tension in the air was palpable. Ilara's presence had disrupted the balance of power in the court, and Kale knew that the whispers and schemes would only grow from here. He turned back to Ilara, his expression unreadable. "You are brave, and perhaps foolish. The world you have stepped into is not forgiving." Ilara took a deep breath.
"I am not afraid of the world, Kale. I am only afraid of losing you to it."
The word struck him harder than any blade. Kale Draven, the Vampire King, feared many things, but he had never feared loss like this, nor had he imagined that a mortal could mean so much to him. The night hung suspended, full of possibilities and dangers alike. Kale's curse whispered, warning him of heartbreak, of betrayal, of the chaos that came when mortals touched immortals. And yet, the pull he felt toward Ilara grew stronger, impossible to resist. He reached out, almost touching her hand, but stopped, leaving a space between them that felt both intimate and excruciating. "You are not safe here," he said softly, "but I cannot let you leave." Ilara met his gaze steadily. "Then I will stay, if only for tonight." Kale's heart, long hardened and shadowed by centuries of solitude, thudded in a way he could scarcely name. He did not know what fate had brought her into his life, but he knew this: the night had changed forever, and so had he. The morning sun barely pierced the thick fog that curled around the city of Netheria. Most mortals slept, but Ilara Wren could not. Her thoughts were a tangle of silver eyes and whispered warnings. She had returned home late last night, yet she could not shake the memory of Kale Draven, the Vampire King, standing silently in the moonlight, his expression unreadable, his presence both terrifying and strangely comforting. The world she had always known, the small shop, the simple streets, felt distant now. The city held more than mystery. It held power, danger, and a pull that tugged at her very soul. She had glimpsed the shadows that moved with intent, the whispers that followed Kale's every step, and the strange magic that clung to him like a second skin. Yet she was drawn to it, as if some thread of destiny had bound her to him. Kale, meanwhile, sat in the heart of the palace, alone in the grand study. The fire on the hearth flickered, casting long shadows across the walls lined with ancient tomes. He did not rest. He never rested. His mind circled endlessly around Alara, the mortal who had seen through his mask, who had walked beside him unafraid. He did not know whether to feel hope or dread. He had survived centuries of betrayal, ruled kingdoms, and fought wars, yet this mortal unsettled him more than any enemy ever could. His curse whispered that she would be his ruin, that any bond he allowed would end in devastation. And still he could not let her go. By noon, Alara found herself at the gates of the palace again. Kale had sent word that he wished to see her, an invitation she could not refuse. She hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside. The corridors, bathed in cold marble light, seemed alive with quiet anticipation. Kale awaited her in the throne room, leaning against the carved black stone with a gaze that made her heart quicken. He spoke without preamble. "There are things you do not understand about this world," he said. "About me. About the darkness you have stepped into." Alara nodded, steady despite the tremor in her chest.
I know there are dangers, but I also know that running away will not protect me. Or you.
His lips twitched in what might have been the closest thing to a smile he had ever given.
You are bold, for a mortal.
Perhaps foolishly so. Perhaps, she said softly. But courage can be stronger than fear.
Kael's eyes, silver and deep as night itself, studied her with intensity.
You do not yet understand the curse that binds me, he said. The women who came before you, they all thought they could change me, could tame me. None survived, none endured, and yet his voice faltered slightly, betraying emotion. I find myself drawn to you. I cannot explain why. Alara stepped closer, though still cautious. Then let me try. Let me understand you. Not to change you, only to help you bear the weight you carry. For a moment, Kale said nothing. He felt the pull of temptation, the dangerous allure of connection. Allowing her close could destroy her, or perhaps save him. His curse had taken everything he cared for, yet for the first time, he considered that it might be broken. Come, he said finally. There is something you must see. They left the throne room and moved silently through the palace, the shadows bending around Kale as if recognizing his command. The city sprawled beneath them, silent except for the distant hum of the markets and the occasional cry of a night creature retreating from the light. At the far edge of the palace grounds stood an ancient garden overgrown with ivy and night-blooming flowers. Statues of long-dead kings and queens looked down from crumbling pedestals. Kale led her to a fountain at the center, its water dark but shimmering in the moonlight. This garden holds the history of my family, he said. Of the curse that has followed us for generations. You must understand it if you are to stay near me. Alara stepped carefully among the flowers, feeling the weight of centuries press against her. Tell me, she said. I am ready. Kale began slowly revealing fragments of his history. The betrayal of his father, the obsession of his mother, the dark magic that had bound him to loneliness and destruction. Each word he spoke seemed to twist the air around them, heavier with sorrow and longing. My mother feared love, Kale said quietly, staring into the fountain. She cast a curse on me, ensuring that any bond I formed would lead to loss. It was meant to protect me from life, from pain. But all it did was create a prison of my own making. Alara listened, her heart aching for the man who had been feared and admired, loved and hated, yet never truly known. You are not a monster, she said. You are a man who has carried too much for too long. But you can still change your path. You can still choose. Kale's gaze lifted to hers, silver and searching.
And if I fail?
He asked. If I hurt you, as I have hurt others, you will not, she said firmly. I will stand beside you, even if the path is dark, even if the danger is greater than we can imagine.
I am not afraid.
Her words struck something deep within him. For the first time, Cale felt the possibility of redemption. Not through power, not through fear, but through trust and love. But Nytheria was not a city that forgave lightly. Whispers had already begun to spread among the vampire court. Cale's unusual attention to a mortal did not go unnoticed. Rivals and schemers saw opportunity in Alara's presence, believing her influence over Cale to be a threat or a weapon. It was during the second night of their clandestine meetings that danger arrived. Alara had been walking through the palace gardens, examining the strange blooms and statues, when a cold wind rustled through the trees. From the shadows emerged two figures, their eyes glinting with malice.
You should not be here, mortal, one hissed. The king's affairs are not yours to witness. Kyle appeared without a sound, his presence filling the garden like a storm.
Shadows twisted and coiled around him, his power visible even in the faint moonlight.
Leave her, he commanded, voice low and dangerous.
The intruders laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the garden.
She is nothing,
one sneered. Merely a pawn. Step aside or suffer the consequences. Kyle's eyes glimmered like silver fire. He moved faster than the eye could follow, casting the intruders into the shadows, their attack meeting only emptiness. The garden seemed to bend to his will, the night itself obeying him. Alara watched, both awed and terrified. She had never seen such raw power, such precision and control. Yet in the midst of victory she saw the strain in Cale's shoulders, the quiet sorrow that lingered beneath his strength.
Are you
always like this? She asked, her voice trembling. Cale turned to her, his expression unreadable. This is my world, he said softly. A world of shadows, power, and danger. You should not be here. But I am, she replied, because I choose to be. The sincerity of her words struck him deeply. He realized that this mortal, so unassuming and fragile in appearance, had a courage that rivaled even the bravest warriors of his court, and in that courage he found a strange hope, a chance perhaps to break the curse that had haunted him for centuries. Days turned into nights as Cale and Alara explored the city together, uncovering hidden temples, forgotten passages, and ancient texts that spoke of magic and destiny. Each discovery brought them closer, their bond deepening beyond fear or fascination. And yet, with each step, the dangers grew. Rival vampires, jealous courtiers, and the shadow of Cale's curse loomed over them, reminding them that the world they navigated was not forgiving. One evening, as they rested in the ruins of a moonlit temple, Cale spoke quietly. There is a way to break the curse, he said. But it is not simple. It requires sacrifice, trust, and courage beyond what most can summon. Ilara's hand brushed his, steady and warm. Then we will face it together, she said. I do not care what the cost is. I will not abandon you. Cale's heart, long hardened and scarred, throbbed with an emotion he had thought impossible. Hope. For the first time he considered a future not dictated by loss and solitude, but by trust and love. And yet, as the moonlight bathed them, a faint shadow flickered in the distance, a whisper of danger, a reminder that Nytheria's night was never safe, and that their journey toward redemption would not be easy. The night hung heavy over Nytheria, thicker than ever before. Shadows curled across the palace like living serpents, twisting around statues and towers, carrying whispers of schemes and threats. Cale, Draven the Vampire King, stood at the highest balcony, silver eyes scanning the city he had ruled for centuries. He had faced countless enemies, survived betrayals, and endured curses that had shaped his life. But tonight, a new storm loomed, a storm that threatened both the city and the mortal who had dared to touch his heart. Ella Wren approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the cold stone. Her hand brushed against the railing as she joined him, gazing out over the mist-wrapped streets. She had come to understand the city, to understand Cale, and to understand herself. Every step had tested her courage, every shadow had whispered danger, yet she had faced it all willingly. Cale, she said softly, the night feels different tonight. He did not answer immediately. His mind was heavy with knowledge of what was coming. The rivals who had gathered, the whispers of curses that could no longer be ignored, and the dark truth that breaking his curse would require sacrifice. Yet, when he turned to her, the silver fire in his eyes softened, just enough to betray the vulnerability he rarely allowed others to see.
Elara,
He said, his voice low.
there is danger ahead.
Not all who seek me wish harm upon themselves, but the world does not forgive the bold. You must be prepared.
I am,
She replied, her tone steady. I am with you. Whatever comes, we face it together. The word struck Cale like a sword softened by warmth. For centuries, he had lived alone, fearing connection. And now, here stood a mortal, unafraid, unwavering, offering him trust and courage he had long believed impossible. From the shadows of the palace gardens, movement stirred. Figures emerged, cloaked and silent, their eyes glinting with malice. The rivals of the court, jealous vampires who had long waited for a chance to test Cale's power, had gathered. And behind them the faint pulse of magic lingered, a reminder of the curse that had bound him all these years. Cale's expression hardened. "Stay behind me," he commanded, and the shadows around him twisted like living things coiling to his will. Elara did not move. She stepped closer instead, her hand brushing against his arm. "No," she said, "we face this together." The tension thickened as the rivals advanced, their forms blurring in the pale moonlight. Cale moved with fluid grace, a storm of power and precision, shadows bending at his command. Yet even as he fought, he knew the curse remained, a shadow waiting to strike, waiting to punish him for daring to hope. "You are reckless," Cale said softly, almost to himself. "I cannot allow you to risk yourself for me."
"I am not afraid," Elara said, meeting his gaze, "and I do not care what happens."
"I choose this, choose you." Her words carried more power than any spell. Cale felt a stirring deep within, a force that had nothing to do with his strength or immortality. It was hope, fragile, yet unyielding. It was trust. It was love. The rivals pressed closer, their intent clear, to challenge the vampire king and harm the mortal who had dared enter his world. Shadows collided, and the night erupted in a blur of motion and magic. Cale's power surged, but so did the pressure of the curse. Every strike he threw, every shadow he twisted, carried the risk of consuming both him and Elara. "Elara!" he shouted suddenly, as a dark figure lunged from the side. He threw a wave of shadow to shield her, and the force sent the attacker crashing to the stone floor. Yet the exertion drained him, the curse whispering that no mortal could survive the fury of Cale's full power. Elara's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "We will survive," she said, voice calm amidst chaos. "I trust you." Cale's heart, long hardened by centuries of fear and solitude, faltered. He realized the truth he had been avoiding. She had already touched him in a way no one ever could, and for the first time he understood that the curse could be broken, not through magic alone, but through trust and sacrifice willingly shared. He raised his hand, calling upon the shadows with a precision and fury that left even the rivals trembling. Shadows spiraled, forming barriers and strikes that pushed back the attackers. And then, at the center of it all, Cale felt the weight of the curse press hardest against him, a dark force clawing at his soul, demanding he retreat, demanding he harm Elara to protect himself. "Cale!" she called, stepping forward despite the danger. "Do not fight alone. We break this together." Her voice, full of unwavering courage, cut through the darkness. He saw her not as a mortal to protect, but as a partner, a force that balanced his power and softened his curse. In that moment, Cale made a choice he had never dared before. He would not allow the curse to control him. He would face it together. The shadows around him coalesced into a storm of silver and black. Magic surged, swirling between Cale and Elara like a living thing. The curse, ancient and relentless, flared, testing every bond, every heartbeat, every ounce of will they shared. Pain flared, but so did power. Together their presence became a shield, their connection a force stronger than any magic or enemy. One of the rivals, sensing defeat, lunged at Alara with cruel intent. Without hesitation, Kale moved between them, his power flaring. Shadows struck the attacker with force enough to send him tumbling into the gardens. Defeated, yet Kale did not stop. He turned, gathering every ounce of strength, not for vengeance, but for protection and transformation. "Alara," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "Hold my hand." She did, and in that instant a surge of energy passed between them, a bond forged of trust, courage, and love. The curse, ancient and cruel, howled in resistance, but their unity pressed against it, a force it could not break. Different light burst from the fountain, spreading across the gardens, illuminating every shadow, purging the lingering dark magic that had haunted Kale for centuries. The rivals fled into the night, defeated not by force alone, but by the unbreakable bond between Kale and Alara. And when the night fell silent again, the first hints of dawn broke over Nytheria, painting the city in pale gold and soft silver. Kale and Alara stood together, breathing heavily, hands entwined, eyes locked. For the first time, Kale felt unshackled from the curse, free not just in body, but in spirit. The weight that had pressed upon him for centuries lifted, replaced by something he had long thought impossible: hope. "Alara," he said softly, his silver eyes reflecting the dawn, "you have done what no one else could." "You have changed me, and you have shown me," she replied, her voice steady, "that courage and trust can face even the darkest night." They did not speak again for a long moment, letting the silence carry the enormity of what had happened. Around them, the city slowly came to life, unaware that a myth had been rewritten in the palace gardens that night. Kale finally spoke, a quiet promise in his tone. "I will not hide from you again. You are mine to protect, not because I must, but because I choose to. And I will walk this path with you, no matter the shadows we face."
Alara smiled, a mixture of relief, love, and awe.
"And I will walk it with you, always." As the sun rose higher, casting warm light across the misty streets, Kale and Alara left the palace gardens together. The city of Nytheria, filled with secrets and shadows, seemed less threatening now. The curse that had bound the vampire king for centuries was broken, not by magic alone, but by courage, trust, and the love of a mortal who dared to face him without fear. Yet even in the quiet, peaceful moments, Kale sensed that Nytheria would never be completely safe. Shadows would always linger, rivals would always scheme, and the past would never fully release its hold. But now, for the first time in centuries, he knew they could face it together. The streets of Nytheria glimmered in the morning light. Mist still clung to the alleys, but the weight of the night had lifted. Kale Draven, the vampire king, and Alara Wren, the mortal who had touched his heart, walked side by side, a king and a mortal, equals in courage, bound by trust, love, and the promise of a shared future. And somewhere in the distance, a shadow lingered, watching, waiting. But even it seemed powerless against the bond they had forged. Kale whispered softly, almost to himself as he looked at her hand in his. "No curse can bind what the heart chooses freely. Then let us choose, every day, together." For the first time in centuries, Kale Draven felt not the weight of his curse, but the light of a future he had never imagined, a future where love, trust, and courage were stronger than any darkness. And in the heart of Nytheria, a legend had changed.